Hey everyone, today we're trying something a little different, testing out streaming with Ableton directly on my desktop, which means using two audio interfaces on the same device, which is a little dicey, so you'll have to let me know how it sounds and looks. This is my Minotaur Techno track that I've been working on for the last few weeks for this upcoming compilation for EasyBot. I took some of the jams from 2 weeks ago and uploaded them into Ableton, just recorded them track by track and sort of arranged this big session out of all of those. This is the original files, and then above is sort of like what I did with it. This version is a lot different from what I had in my Octatrack. I just kind of came up with some general sketches, and then I used my computer to put most of the actual arrangement together. And then I actually took the bass out sub, which was like a Minotaur patch, and I played the entire thing sort of listening to the section right here. I basically had this arrangement, more or less, and muted my Minotaur track and recorded additional takes of that in subsequent sections. And that let me record new performances of the same Minotaur patch. And then I basically took those, like this is the bigger jam, like one example of it. I was just sort of playing with the knobs and stuff. And then here's where I sort of took it and curated it and decided on some of the patterns that I wanted to use from that performance. So it's very much not a live performance in this case. I think the more that I've worked on it, the more I've wanted to kind of like dial in specific moments. So I basically took my favorite sections from here and have been sort of inserting them in different places to create individual moments in the song. But let's listen to the whole thing start to finish. One thing I'm thinking about is potentially adding more hi-hat rhythm. Some of these samples are taken from previous Octatrack live streams. This thing. That sample you can see is from last year in like June. So Yeah, this is kind of one of my bigger dreams of using the Octatrack that I kind of play with every once in a while, is like this hope of being able to have this hybrid setup of Octatrack and Ableton. And the most effective way I usually find to do that is getting a general sketch first using the Octatrack, and then going in and recreating that structure in Ableton, and then muting individual sections and sort of re-performing them, kind of refining down what it is I want. So for example, this, I knew I wanted some kind of 909 hi-hat. So using my Fader Fox, which has control over release, I basically just played a 1-bar loop of a 909 hi-hat with some LFOs on it to kind of make it sound different each time. And then I adjusted the release of the hi-hat over the course of, like, you know, honestly the whole song. If you stretch this whole thing out, you can see I sort of recorded a bunch of, I basically listened to the whole track and tried to add things that I wanted, and then I trimmed it down to my favorite parts. Oh yeah, I like that. Eighth note delay. Yeah, so basically my goal today is to see if I can get some feedback from people, yourself included. Definitely happy to try out some things. What is that? I think I'm getting my timing wrong. I can't quite figure out what it is. We'll skip the echo for now. Welcome y'all. This is another rhythm I added entirely outside of my initial jam. This was something from, looks like July last year. I threw some trash on it. Yes, so this is taken from an initial jam. I'll show you. This is the original jam, and it's much more simple than the track that I've come up with here. So basically I took those and within that set, which was 2 weeks ago, that was kind of like the master set. I had sections where I had only used kick or I'd only used hi-hat, and I had them separated out into Q and main. So my beats were on main, I think, and my instruments were on Q. Yeah, so everything was on, all the instruments were on Q and my beats were on main. And I made sure that like at any given point while I was recording that I would have some sections that had just hi-hat and just kick. And then later on I isolated them out into loops in this session. And it did take some time to sort of bring things out and separate them into these separate sections. But the general idea was to get the parts that I was excited about and then to start building around those. So, for example, I have this hi-hat. Which I like, but later on I added this extra hi-hat. And this is not from the original. A lot of these instruments, I mean, this one is from the original, I think, but many of the melodic elements are not from the original. And like I was mentioning to Dan just a little bit ago, this Minotaur Patch, it was originally mixed in with a lot of effects that I had done live, but I was having a hard time mixing it with other stuff, so I ended up actually re-recording the entire bass section into like 6-minute long jams where I was just kind of exploring different ideas. And just finding different things that I could do with them before slicing them into my favorite sections and kind of arranging them. Not the fastest process, for sure, because it's been like, what, 4 weeks now and I'm still working on this. I think my favorite section is this one, though. This kind of, I think my biggest gripe about this track is that the pace is a bit confusing, at least for me. Like some of the more exciting parts end before I want them to, and some of the less exciting parts extend longer. And I think I'm trying to just sort of like even everything out a little bit. Like for example, I really love this section that sort of breaks down into these like low tones. I feel like I could extend this out at least like another 8 bars or something. Because once it gets to this orange section, it's basically the outro. You can kind of feel it on its way out. Yeah, it's in one of those final stages. Okay, I'm going to play to the end, and then we'll listen to it again. Then we'll talk about it some more. I think I'll end it there. Yeah, it's kind of in one of those stages where I have to get like the impression of the whole track, so I end up listening to the whole thing like all the way through, and then by the time I'm at the end, I'm like, what did I want to change again? Which could be a good sign, but it's also just like I'm pretty happy with where things are. So yeah, definitely taking feedback from people if there's anything you hear or don't hear. I'm gonna play it again and try not to commentate on it. Okay. I'm actually not mad at it. Pretty into the way it develops. Open to outside opinions. Curious if people think that the melodic elements are too sparse. It is minimal techno, after all. One thing that I was thinking about was I really love the way that this hi-hat thing sounds like a sort of a crinkling paper or something like that. And there's definitely a part of me that wants to hear that emerging from something a little bit less predictable, if that makes sense. I'm curious about having like a sort of a crackly hi-hat-esque foundation, so it's sort of like stabbing out of that, but something a little less rhythmic, a la Blawan or something. I don't know if anybody understands what I'm talking about right now, but I'm just gonna try it and we'll see. I'm gonna look for some Foley paper crinkling. Ah, this is good. Let's see how this is. This might be terrible, we'll see. But I'm basically gonna distort paper sound and try to create a soft bed for my hi-hats. Mostly motivated by the producer Blawan here, trying to create something that's like less rhythm based. But if I have this hi-hat, sorry, I keep soloing, but my vocal is coming directly through Ableton, so it keeps muting me. You know what I mean? It needs some tweaking, but yeah, some tweaking. Okay. What I want is for this to be like just embedded in the background. Part of that has to do with distorting it and kind of making it more similar. So I'm going to take a retro color here, and obviously it's a little different because I distorted this originally via okay, turn off noise. Actually, noise might come in handy. I initially distorted this by way of the Octatrack's native distortion effect. So we're going to play with using paper sound and then just distorting the crap out of it. And if I put a sidechain on this, oof, game over. Let's sidechain it with my kick. I don't know if my screen might be very large, and I don't know if you can read the text here, but I gotta enlist a sidechain kick. because my kick is too noisy. Yeah, so my friend Eric actually taught me this. If your kick is too long, your sidechain will not be as effective. I'm not really looking to fuss with EQ and all that, so literally just gonna make this messy block of sidechain rims, which will not have an out. They'll just be going to sends only, but I can still get information from that track by way of, where is it? Pre-effects. So there you go. Nothing too crazy yet. It still needs to be a bit more distorted. Reducing the width a little bit. I could also try pitching it. Not sure if I like the noise there. Hey, Rustic. The party is in a library. That's minimal techno for you. No. There's actually some rhythm in there. You can hear it. I'm just gonna listen to it with the whole thing and see if I like it. There's an easier way to do this, isn't there? I think you could consolidate this loop down. Yes, no hardware today. A departure. I was actually looking in my... Part of why this took so long is because I was looking in my stream history. Like, when was the last time I used just the computer? And I couldn't find it. I think either I've never actually done it, or I deleted the file because the video stream was not good enough. And I don't know, maybe this is working for you, maybe it's not, but we're soldiering on. And if the frame rate isn't good enough in the final version, then I might just delete it. So yeah, so I can sort of sculpt this as I'm listening to the track and see. Have y'all played with Trash before? Trash is pretty great. Get some pretty cool convolution effects here, like this. Completely unrecognizable now. That is bizarre. some reason I like the lower stuff better. And what's cool too is if you fuck up all this stuff in the before it, this is stuff that I like never do, even though it looks like I do it a lot because this is me doing it on camera. Like check this out. If I gate some of the sounds, like why would I do that? This one's easily the most intriguing one so far because it sort of creates this sweepy sort of sound. You can also convolute pig sounds and like monkey sounds. Just don't ask me to explain how this works because I don't know. Kind of curious about putting this first. A little too intense there. You know, it's kind of wild. I started this whole thing saying that I was going to try to make it fit in with the paper sound, the paper sounding hi-hat, which is this one. And it sounds like nothing like that. I think I'm just happy with some weirdness because I feel like the track is good. It just some people might hate me for saying this, but it's not challenging enough. And what's cool too is I have a few different samples that I can pick out. Basically, I've just got like 2-bar loops that I'm sort of picking at random, looking at this waveform, just kind of making arbitrary decisions about where it might start. And there's rhythm in there, you know. Some of it is just better than others. It's sort of a matter of just kind of sussing it out with your ears. Like that, not really. Not feeling that. And then we also have an additional rhythmic element to it, which is taking sidechain and imposing a bit of rhythm with sidechain. Actually, having some noise in this wouldn't be too bad. This is kind of nice too. Thank you, YWC. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I mean, starting to warm up to this thing. Sort of like an ambient, layer here. And yeah, it takes a little time to go away, so maybe we can adjust the noise. Let's say okay, ducking, let's turn it off. And obviously, like with something like this, you can add all kinds of crazy shit to it. You can add a flanger to it, Might be a bit too much, but or like a chorus. I'm just kind of exploring here. Low rate, high amount. The filter. It's got a mind of its own now. It's not even... Oh my god. There's nothing there. What exactly am I trying to accomplish here? I think it's some sort of like a sculpting aspect of techno that I've never really attempted. Sounds kind of like a train. can't get these things to work. Let's keep going with it. I'm actually pretty into this particular section here. It's pretty unassuming, but it does provide something kind of nice to the texture. There's something about the way that it shifts abruptly that I kind of want to capture. I mean, it's already doing it based on the time. It's almost better that I don't fuck with it now that it already does it. I'm almost tempted to do some kind of like step filter thing to accentuate what's going on. I also don't want to fuck it up though. Welcome, Sakis. Are you from Greece? Is that the Greek emoji? That's cool. There's also, of course, like putting an echo on the bass, which, you know, a little afraid to do it, but worth a shot, I think. I can put it on C. I'm thinking like boom, doom, 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 ping pong at a dotted eighth. Is that right? Let's see. I don't know if I want to go there with giving the bass too much effects. It's sort of like, I mean, it is a huge part of the track already. I'm okay with that. Yeah, I kind of like this idea of sort of handing off the more atmospheric rhythms to each other so they don't overlap. I went to Fabric before. Has Fabric closed? I feel like I heard something about that a while back. But yeah, I remember. Oh yeah, you mentioned it closed. Or Toby mentioned it was closed. Flattered that this could appear somewhere like that. Jaded. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, this thing just kind of appears out of nowhere. It really doesn't show up until... I can actually turn this down. Yeah, I guess I'm definitely sort of trying to make something that could be played in a club and has the trappings of something you could actually use as a DJ, which, you know, it's funny coming from me because I've never actually DJ'd professionally, so just kind of stabbing in the dark here. Yeah. Thank you, Toby. How do you feel about the bass delay? Is it too much? Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. This one extra track that I added in the second half. Check this out. It's a tiny little squeak sound. And I can't even remember what it comes from. I think I think I recorded it on my Octatrack a while back. but I decided, I think it was a hi-hat, and I decided to align it with the kick, and it creates this almost like springy, squeaky kick. It's very satisfying. But I didn't want to use it the whole time, of course, so. And that distorted melody in the top is very much inspired by Daniel Avery. As is the bass, to be honest. That sort of like round, slow decay kind of thing. Cool. I keep wanting to kind of listen to it and see if there's anything else I can add, but again, I think it's been like, I've been sort of like stabbing at it on and off for the last week or so. Just to recap for some of y'all coming in a little later. 2 weeks ago, I recorded this sort of bass set, which has kind of been mangled and stripped for parts, essentially. Within that, I found melodies, hi-hats, kicks, rhythms that I wanted to keep. Arranged them over here in sections that I thought sounded good, which did take some time and isn't necessarily what I would recommend as the most efficient way to do it. But here we are with, how long is this piece? So this doesn't count, so I should actually delete this stuff. The track is about 6 minutes, if not 6.5. Might have to, I don't know if I can abridge it. Maybe it won't go on the cassette version of the EasyBot compilation this time, because it's quite long. But yeah, so I basically took these pieces, made them into loops, and distributed them through this project. The next thing I did about a week and a half ago was I discovered that I really was having a hard time sitting with the bass. The bass originally sounded more like this. Which was really cool, but I was also having a hard time sort of like housing it within all the other things I was trying to do. The amount of space that it was taking up. And that's honestly something that I might try exploring just a little bit if I had anything else to do with it, is sort of exploring the idea of creating different spatial phases in the track. So like maybe one of them feels like you're in a tiny box, kind of like Clark will do sometimes. If you look up the track Honey Badger, which I reference a lot because it just feels like you're going, like the song feels like you're entering different rooms of a crazy club. I really love that effect. And part of that has to do with not so much, I mean, he does change melodies and rhythms, but he also changes the entire space with like reverb and the way that space is sort of implied through reverb. And that's something that I've sort of kept generally pretty stable. I think it's just by default I tend to maintain a certain space. It's just something that I think like in production you just kind of learn to do from an early point, like sort of establish what the space is going to be like and then kind of go from there. But with this I was sort of like trying to decide on what kind of space I wanted, and I decided I wanted more control of my bass line. So I muted this original bass line and just jammed on the Minotaur, recording only the Minotaur alongside this arrangement. And the result was a second jam, which was, you know, this whole Minotaur jam here. And then I cut that into individual sections that I liked the most and sort of put them together. So I was like, okay, so the beginning section, I'll probably have the filter be pretty low. As I evolve, I'll include sections that have like a higher resonance. And then I'll include some things that have like a bit of a flourish to the end of them, like this. Sorry, I should mute this thing down here. Some other things were added once I had sort of put this together, and I had some of these elements as well. Like some things that kept me excited about the track, honestly, were taking outside loops. A lot of these are actually taken from recordings I've made on the Octatrack like over the past year, and I just haven't really taken a lot of time to like go back to like basically revisit them and try to put them into things. So this rhythm here was sampled via the Octatrack back in, you can sort of look at the timestamp here, it's 2020 July 15th at 1:54. And the original sound of this is actually I have no idea how I made that sound anymore. It's kind of lost, but I added trash to it and then I added it into this at an interesting rhythm because this isn't actually how it sounds. You can look at the one is kind of staggered. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for listening. And yeah, so when I think about like the sound that I was going for, particularly when I mentioned that I wanted more control over the bass, I think I was starting to, I sort of had these two ideas in my head that I wanted to attempt. One being Blawan, which is one of my favorite techno producers, and Daniel Avery, which is kind of like a bit more accessible techno, but almost like house leaning. I don't really know much about the subgenres, but he's a little bit more traditional techno, and I shouldn't say traditional techno because I have no clue what that means, but Blawan is like, 134 BPM, no snares, oftentimes some crazy undulating sound underneath. You're not sure if it's like 4/4 or if it's some other crazy time signature. And then Daniel Avery is much more like, you've got some cool acid sounds and I don't know, it sounds like more clubby, I guess. And he's been sort of lately veering into more distorted synth territory and kind of getting out of the more traditional, I guess, structures. But as I was working on this, I kind of realized that these are such different worlds that I kind of had to pick one to some extent. And so my main, I think, approach is more of a Daniel Avery approach this time around. More traditional snaps, maybe slightly more predictable in terms of what the tools, what the components are. And it does make me want to explore further what a Blawan-esque thing might sound more like. I'm just going to type these two names in here. Blawan versus Daniel Avery. And some of the crackly hi-hats that I came up with, this is basically just taking a bit crusher in the Octatrack and applying it to some kind of, I don't think it was even a rhythm originally, it was kind of a sound effect, but I was able to sort of create a hi-hat-esque sound. By adjusting the decay on each piece and just hitting it rhythmically like I would a hi-hat in the Octatrack. And you can hear that it's slightly different every time. And part of that is because I'm picking different slices of this sample. I don't even remember what the sample was. But if you listen to, if you check out some Blawan, you'll find this is probably like similar to something that you might hear in their music, and it's one of the most accessible aspects of their music is the hi-hat. And then everything else is sort of undulating around it in this like really interesting way. And that's where some of my desire to introduce flange and chorus is coming from, but I'm kind of throwing it in haphazardly and finding that that's not actually what Blawan does. So I think if I was to make a more Blawan approach, I would remove a lot of these elements and I would focus more on the bass and hi-hat and kick as three of the primary elements, and I would not have nearly as many sort of melodic interludes. But I think what ended up happening was as I started to work on this in Ableton, I started to fall back on some of my structural experience and knowledge and being satisfied with where that takes me, which is sort of like, oh, I know how this kind of goes with regards to like, oh, here's a chord I can try. And this will give me enough energy to attempt other things in this section. You know, like these little musical interludes do a lot for that. And if you listen to Blawan's music, there's very little of that going on. It's very easy to get lost in their tracks. But I really couldn't resist once I had added this snap sound. And this was back when I was working on it on the Octatrack. Once I had found this snap, I was just like so excited about how it sounded with everything else that I think I had already sort of started to depart from the Blawan aesthetic, because Blawan doesn't use a lot of steady snare or clap or whatever. One thing that's making me kind of happy about this track too is that even though it's somewhat predictable, accessible. There's a lot of stuff that only happens once, like this kind of figure only happens once in the track, and then later on you have a different figure. I'm pretty into that. Wondering if I should cut this section. Is it too abrupt, maybe? Yeah. Actually, I could actually do this. Just kind of give it a little bit of a call and response. If I ended it sooner. Nope. Too abrupt. Cool. I think that's all I'm gonna work on for now. I honestly think that, given that it's sort of minimal techno, I think part of me keeps wanting to add more excitement, and I don't know if that's really what it needs. So I'm just gonna err on the side of letting it percolate and listening to it here and there. If you have any thoughts on like the track or questions, definitely drop them in the comments. I always check my comments and stuff pretty regularly, so happy to answer any questions you might have about the track or my approach to it. Yeah, I know I mentioned something about sort of playing with space, but again, I think minimal is kind of the key word here, and I think that's why I decided to go with something a little bit more traditional, because it's not something I'm that used to doing. And at least with some structure, I can decide. I know what I'm not doing, and it's taking a lot of restraint. But yeah, thanks for dropping in. And I think I should be done with this by next week. I mean, the due date for turning this in is next week, so should be finished up. Not sure if I'll be dropping in on Tuesday, but do I have anything else coming up at the moment? Probably not. Doing some termite inspection stuff on my studio, so hopefully after that I can start moving back in, and I'll be back in my regular space and I can stream a little bit more regularly. Anywho, cheers.